Hey, what's going on guys? It's Syrian here, and I'm bringing you a bit of a different video today. It's a little bit of more of a serious one, and I'm just going to get right into it. Today we are going to be talking about what exactly went wrong with Black Ops 4, because I think it's safe to say at this point, people have really fallen out of love with this game, and whilst I am not 100% among them, I can definitely acknowledge that the game has A, gone downhill since release, and B, is not what fans were wanting from Treyarch. First of all, I just wanted to get something out of the way very quickly, a little bit of history and a little bit of context. I am very much a Call of Duty lover. Some people might even go so far as to call me a fanboy. I am the sort of person who will defend a lot of aspects of Call of Duty, and I do try to give the developers the credit they deserve, and I do try to cut them some slack on this, that, and the other for various reasons that a lot of people really don't seem to care about, but that I know are impactful to the state of the game. So I just wanted to make that clear. I'm not just a blind hater. I'm not jumping on any bandwagons here as much as it might look like that. I'm just someone who for many years now has loved Call of Duty. Many of the COD games have been amongst my favorite games of all time, and pretty much every single COD that I've played has had at least some redeeming features and has been fun on a moment-to-moment basis to at least some degree. And I will still say overall that basically COD at its worst is still a lot more fun than most PvP games at their best. So keep that in mind when you're listening to this video. I'm not just someone who's hating for the sake of it. I do really care about the series, and I care about what happens to it in the future. And I think helping people identify what exactly went wrong with games like Black Ops 4 can only help. So to that end, do please keep in mind, like I said, I do try to cut the developers some slack when it comes to decision making, and I do try to see things from their perspective in all things, including things that I find annoying. I'm well aware of the fact that what I might envision as the perfect game is not what other people may envision, and is therefore not what developers can cater to. So yeah, a couple more things to quickly clarify before we get into it. I do play on PC, and while I will try to keep this video as console neutral as possible, there will be one or two things that pertain more to PC than console, but by and large, the stuff that I will be talking about today is platform-wide and it doesn't affect either platform to a significantly bigger degree than any other. And finally, I just wanted to make it clear that I do still very much enjoy Black Ops 4. If I didn't enjoy it, I wouldn't play it, and even though I will acknowledge the game has a lot of flaws, and I will always criticize those flaws and point them out, and if you watch my streams, you'll know that I do often grump about the game and call it shit, but that's just the usual, COD frustration boiling over in the heat of the moment. We talk shit about it because we love it, but I do still think that this game is very enjoyable for the most part, and I think that people could probably do themselves a big favor and kind of acknowledge that when they play these sorts of games. So with that out of the way, let's jump right into it. I could talk a lot about various things wrong with the game, but every game has its flaws. They're many and varied and incredibly numerous, but a lot of these are flaws that are kind of inherent to the genre and inherent to Call of Duty as a series, rather than being particularly wrong with Black Ops 4. So, by and large, I'm going to focus on things that I think Black Ops 4 and sometimes sort of more modern COD has messed up in particular. There are a ton of different things wrong with basically every game. There is no such thing as the perfect game. But for this video, I'm going to focus on 5 things that I've picked out as the biggest issues that really helped turn people off this game when they were so keen on it to begin with, and so eager to enjoy it after a couple of years of community disappointment with games like World War II and Infinite Warfare. So, for the first issue, we're going to jump right in and talk about the melee system. Now, as I said earlier, I will try to keep this as platform neutral as I can, but I do understand that this melee issue is a bit bigger problem on PC than it is on console. For whatever reason, people don't tend to melee as much on console as they do on PC, but it's still an issue no matter what platform you're on. And I think even on console, it is one of the biggest issues with the game. The melee system in general is broken beyond belief in Black Ops 4, and it's not just because of the melee weapons that they keep adding in every single operation. While the melee weapons definitely play a big part in it, I will be focusing on the so-called shot punching a lot as well. So, melee weapons in general I want to talk about first. The concept of one-hit kill melee has always been a controversial one in Call of Duty, but I think it's safe to say that at this point in the series, people are well and truly sick of dying to melee. And to that end, Treyarch in Black Ops 3 sat down and said, alright, well, if people don't like dying in one hit to melee, we'll make the melee not kill in one hit. Sounds fine on paper, but in practice, all it does is create even more problems than it purported to fix. So we'll dig into that a little more later, but first, let's talk about that design choice and how it's ended up being in Black Ops 4. So, we have this system where there is the TTK in Black Ops 4, that is the time to kill, that is how long enemies take to die when you shoot at them, has been slowed down to the point that it is slower than it's ever been. Enemies now have 150 health, and guns tend to kill in 4 to 6 bullets, or even as high as 9 bullets, or even more depending on certain circumstances. And that means that one-hit kill melee is incredibly strong now, stronger than it has ever been. And that's a big problem, because for some reason, well, I think we know the reason, but we'll get into that later, in nearly every single operation, Treyarch includes some form of new one-hit kill melee weapon. And while you need to equip that as an actual weapon, you can just slap that on as a secondary and just switch to it, and it doesn't take very long to switch to, and you can then kill people in one hit even if they've pumped you full of bullets. Dying in one hit after pumping someone full of bullets has always happened in COD, but it's never been so ridiculous as it is in Black Ops 4, and that's because of the slow TTK. It also doesn't help that in Black Ops 3, which is where this change to make it so that only, melee-specific weapons could one-hit kill happened at first, in Black Ops 3, they also decided it would be a great idea to, by default, include an obnoxiously strong lock-on and lunge mechanic to the melee system. So, this means that there is less skill than ever involved in killing someone with a melee weapon or with a shot punch. So that's a problem in and of itself, but most importantly, what it does is trivialize and basically ruin the close range engagements in the game, and it makes it so that if people are playing in a certain way, there is very little you can do about it. I'm sure anyone who's played Black Ops 4 has had the displeasure of running into that one team that just sits in a building with melee weapons, or even that one guy who just sits in a tower on what is that map called? Sits in a tower on Seaside with Torque and puts razor wire and a microwave up in the tower and sits there with his melee weapon waiting for someone to walk into it. It would be all well and good if you could go into the tower and if you knew they were there, you knew they were gonna what they were gonna be doing, you could counter it with smart play. You could uh, put on a good close range weapon like a Spitfire or something and melt them before that they could kill you. Right? Sounds fine on paper. In practice, it's largely impossible unless the person who's playing like that is an absolute moron. Most of the time, if you push their little engagement range, they're going to win because there's no skill involved in whether they get the melee kill or not. They can't fail to execute that properly. All they need to do is get in range and then left click and dead. Right? Meanwhile, you have to hit them God knows how many times with your weapon, and there just simply isn't enough time to because of this slow TTK in Black Ops 4. So the melee weapons really just ruin close range gunfights and close range engagements in general, and it really makes certain maps play so much worse than they should. So Seaside is a great example. I didn't mind that map in the beta, but once people started playing it with melee weapons in close range, it's now I dodge it more times than not when it comes up because I know it's just not going to be fun. And that's not something you want happening. You don't want your melee system completely ruining an entire subsection of maps just because they have a lot of close quarters engagements. Melee should not, in most people's opinions, I think now, melee shouldn't even be a part of COD, and if it's going to be a part of COD, it should be significantly weaker than it is now. And that brings me to the shot punching. Now, with shot punching, the biggest problem, again, is that it's instantaneous, and it trivializes the close range engagements. So, we went from sort of old COD where you would put multiple bullets into someone and then they'd hit their knife button and lunge you and kill you in one hit. Instead, what happens now is you get into a close range engagement with someone, they hit you with a bullet and then punch you. Meanwhile, you've hit them with 4 bullets. They win the engagement because the punch does 145 damage for some reason and you only have 150 health. It's basically the exact same thing as old knifing in COD. It just has an extra step, and the fact that most of those engagements are won or lost based on who got the better hipfire doesn't help because all that does is throw extra RNG into the mix. And the very last thing you want is a game where your gunfights at close range are decided on RNG alone. So melee in general, it's hard to get right, and honestly, I think it would be better for the game if it just didn't exist in COD. There's no reason for it to, except for the only reason I can fathom that you would want, or from a developer standpoint, that they would want melee in the game now, would be to prevent dirt battles at close range. And while I can kind of understand that thinking, that thought process, I have to say dirt battles they're not desirable, but they're not going to ruin the game experience for anyone. If you have a dirt battle with someone in Call of Duty, it's usually more funny than it is aggravating, and it's something that both players tend to just kind of laugh about rather than getting frustrated about. What players do absolutely get frustrated about is shooting someone first, shooting 4, 5, 6 times, and then dying instantly in one frame to the notorious shot punch. And the reason I don't know why it seems to be so much more prevalent on PC. I do see the upper echelons of console players shot punch a lot, and it seems very effective on console. I think it must just be sort of mechanically slightly more difficult to do on console, because I'm not too familiar with COD controls on console. I think you need a click in a stick in most control schemes, which isn't the easiest thing to do on a instant reaction sort of level, whereas on PC you just hit a button on your keyboard and that's it. It's very easy. So it is slightly more of a PC issue, but it is still a thing on console. It definitely happens quite a lot at the higher levels, and it's a problem in general, and shot punching aside, one-hit kill melee weapons are an even bigger problem, and they need to be gotten rid of. And I think they're a big part of what makes the game very frustrating to play at times. Moving on, we come to the attachments, and this has kind of been a problem in COD since Black Ops 3, but I'll give a little context to this. In Black Ops 2, which a lot of people very rightly regard as the pinnacle of Call of Duty, there was an attachment called stock, and on assault rifles and LMGs, it was pretty much a must-have. If you were using an assault rifle or an LMG, chances are you used stock. And people who play Call of Duty will know what stock does. It helps your strafe speed when you're aiming down your sights. After Black Ops 2, Treyarch made the strange decision in Black Ops 3 to nerf stock into the ground when it came to its use on assault rifles and LMGs. And they took it a step further in Black Ops 4 and made it so that the guns don't all get the same attachments. So not only did they nerf some of the attachments that were very popular and made the game feel a lot better, they also started restricting access on various weapons. Now, from what I can tell, they wanted to do this to encourage, sort of encourage different play styles amongst weapon groups. They didn't want assault rifles to be played in the same fashion as LMGs or SMGs or whatever. I would make the argument that even in Black Ops 2, which is where you could probably argue that the weapons tended to play, the different weapon categories tended to play quite similarly, there was still more than enough variety in play styles in Black Ops 2. For example, if you were using a Scorpion in Black Ops 2, you weren't going to play in the same fashion as if you were using a Mark 48 LMG. They don't play anything alike, even if you have stock on your Mark 48 and quick draw and all the things that you could possibly put on it to try to turn it into as much of an SMG LMG as you could, So the decision to restrict attachments to guns is a very bizarre one, and more bizarre is the strange obsession Treyarch has with nerfing mobility. I get the feeling that their playtesters might say stuff like it's frustrating to die to someone who's, juking and wiggling with their stock SMGs, LMGs, etc. But what's kind of that's kind of just I'm not sure how I would address that as a developer, apart from to say that yes, it's frustrating to die in that fashion, but it's also frustrating to be confined to a really small subset of weapons because they're the only ones that have proper mobility that you actually want and that you want to play. And unfortunately, what we see with nerfed stock in Black Ops 3 and now nerfed stock in Black Ops 4 and not even available stock in Black Ops 4, what we see is a bunch of very frustrating playstyles and a bunch of very needlessly campy, slow, sluggish engagements that just tend to be frustrating and irritating for people to die to in Black Ops 4, which is an otherwise very fast-paced game. I've mainly focused on stock with this attachment problem, but it also exists with other attachments too. Certain guns like the GKS just get absolutely ruined by certain lobbies because they don't have access to FMJ. So if you're running a GKS and you run into someone who's using a MOG or an assault rifle and they have body armor, you have to hit them. Let's say you're at a decent sort of range where the GKS really is kind of optimal because it's supposed to be used at longer ranges because of its lack of recoil. You have to hit them, you're looking at like upwards of 9 hits to kill them. And then, heaven help you if they have attack boost on, then you're looking at even more. It reaches ridiculous levels in this TTK, and that all would be fixed if you could just go, oh, okay, there's a lot of body armor in this lobby. I'm gonna slap on my, FMJ on my GKS, and now I can still use this weapon that I enjoy using. I just don't, I have a counter to what the enemy's doing. It's not a matter of, well, there's a couple of people running body armor in this lobby. I guess I can't use a bunch of the guns in the game because they just don't have FMJ. That sort of stuff is very frustrating. It leads to... it's not a desirable feeling to feel pigeonholed or just feel like you just cannot use a certain weapon based on the way the enemies are playing. That's the exact opposite of what you want. And what it all comes down to is the attachment system in Call of Duty used to be this wonderful way to mix up what it is you got out of various guns. Generally speaking, attachments have been used to counter a gun's weakness, more so than anything else. So, for example, in Black Ops 2, LMGs ADS very slowly and strafed very slowly by default with no attachments. That made them feel bad to use at first, but once you used them a bunch, you got stock and you got quick draw, and you could actually run around with them. You could actually run around with LMGs and compete at different ranges, because if you got caught on the sprint, you could pull up quickly, you could ADS quickly, they felt nice to move and strafe with while still being balanced. And that's the real problem with this lack of attachment diversity in Black Ops 4, where a gun like, say, the Hades just has no stock. It just doesn't get stock. So if you want to use it normally, you're restricted in your playstyle to a ridiculous degree. You don't have the option of putting stock on it and then using it in a more mobile fashion. The Hades might not be the best example because you can put the op mod on it, but the point stands. You can say the same thing of the Auger DMR or the Rampart, and I can understand to some degree why they did this, why they made this change, but I don't agree with it, and I think it was really bad for the game. I think it was really bad for weapon diversity, and I think it was really bad for playstyles, because it just results in people playing in what most people consider to be a very irritating fashion if they use those guns. How often have you seen someone with a DMR or a Rampart actually running around? Not very often, I'd imagine. And that's because you can't run around very well with them unless you're extremely good, and if that's the case and you're extremely good, chances are you're just not even going to waste your time. You're going to use something that's more fun and suits your playstyle more if you really want to run around like that. So the extremely irritating melee system and the weird attachment racism, we'll call it, kind of play into each other, and they kind of play into the next problem as well, and that problem is the TTK. Now, for those who don't know, this will be a very small number of people watching this video, I'd imagine, TTK stands for time to kill, and it basically is, it's how long it takes from the time you start shooting at an enemy till they're dead. Right? Now, Black Ops 4 has easily the slowest TTK of any COD, and it was a very conscious decision that they have made to make it so much slower. I'm not really sure why, but ever since Black Ops 3, there has been a trend amongst all the developers to make the TTK slower than ever. Black Ops 3 had the slowest TTK of any COD when it was released. So did Infinite Warfare. So did World War II. And so did Black Ops 4. We have gotten progressively slower with every single COD release since Black Ops 3. The last COD that didn't significantly slow the TTK was Advanced Warfare. And that was a very long time ago at this point. So comparing Black Ops 4 to, say, even a COD like Black Ops 2, which I will remind everyone had a slower TTK than games like Modern Warfare 2 or COD 4, the TTK in BO4, so in the older CODs with the faster TTK, you could have your one-shot snipers, you could have your one-shot shotguns, you could have your one-hit kill melee, and none of it was as annoying to die to as it is in Black Ops 4. Because how many times have you had the situation where you put umpteen bullets into someone and then die instantly to a one-hit kill weapon or a one-hit kill melee? The slow TTK really exacerbates that problem, the shoot first, die first phenomenon that is probably one of the most annoying things about COD. You know, you can, if you sat down and you tried to make a list of all the number one things that aggravate people when they play Call of Duty, shooting first, getting a bunch of hit markers, and then dying instantly is probably right up there with, you know, number one or number two. So, as much as I can recognize that the decision to make the TTK so much slower actually benefits someone like me, someone who's very good at the game and makes, you know, best use of sort of aiming, tracking, that sort of thing, you know. So to give an example, in an older COD, like, say, Modern Warfare 2, if you walk into a building and there's someone in a corner, they shoot you in the back, you're dead instantly. Meanwhile, in Black Ops 4, a lot of the time you walk into a room, if there's someone in a corner, they shoot you in the back, you can spin around, and if you've got good reaction times, you can spin around and, you know, use some cracked MLG movement to throw their aim off and kill them before they can land enough shots, right? I can recognize that that actually does benefit people like me and good players like me, but at the same time, I understand that it's also dying to someone who you've shot a million times and you really feel like should be dead already, and then they just gat you, and, you know, maybe they're really good with a red gun, or maybe they bullshit you with some no-skill insta-kill weapon like the MOG. Either way, it's incredibly frustrating to die to, and it's incredibly frustrating when it happens to me, and I can understand that I generally tend to kill people in Black Ops 4 a lot faster than the average person, and that means that the average person is experiencing this frustration on an extremely exaggerated level, you know? So you have the situation where multiple times a game, maybe in nearly every gunfight, you've got these average players going up against each other, and depending on the situation, it's very easy to feel like you got robbed. Whereas in the older CODs with the faster TTK, it wasn't so easy to feel like you got completely robbed, or feel like you just get that feeling of, God damn, I shot him so many times. You know, how is he alive? That sort of thing, you know? It's not something that I think people have realized too much, unfortunately. People have mostly focused on other issues with the more recent CODs, but the trend to slowly increase this time to kill has been very consistent across CODs and across developers for the last 5 years, and I don't think it was a good thing for the game or the series, because not only does it give you that extra feeling of frustration, it also, like I said earlier, really throws off balance as far as one-hit kill weapons goes. It means that snipers, shotguns, and melee weapons are impossible to balance. Good luck. Just good luck with any of that. And it also means that people can't get those old feeds that they used to get in COD. You know, one of the things that people have always loved about Call of Duty is getting those sick feeds, you know. So, adding all that together, the TTK change is a really, really bad one, and I think they'd do very well to reverse it. I don't want to see a return to Modern Warfare 2 or COD 4 days where every gun kills you instantly and you get no time to react to anything. But I do think Black Ops 2's TTK was in a nice place. Even MW3, which was slightly faster TTK wise than Black Ops 2, I think had a nice TTK level for Call of Duty. And I think that if the COD devs want a return to form, then that's the TTK that they should be aiming for. This video actually ended up going way longer than I expected, guys, so I'm going to split it up into two parts, and I will be releasing the next part very soon. I really hope you enjoyed this video. It's very much from the heart. I very much enjoyed making it, and I hope it does some good, or at least brings some awareness to some of the things that I think COD has made mistakes with in recent times. I'm really hoping for better in the future, so if you did like the video, don't forget to leave a like, and if you're new to the channel, don't forget to sub, and I will see you all in the next one.